We've got an awesome, awesome story today as Trump is now trying to counter the whole 1619 project with what he calls the 1776 Commission. And this is from the Daily Caller here. And it says the 1776 Commission, Trump to sign executive order combating schools teaching students to be ashamed of America. And I love this. For one, I actually work at a college, and I am absolutely inundated with emails talking about anti-racism, social justice, pro all the causes, all the left-wing, liberal, Marxist-infused causes. I'm inundated with that stuff all the time, and I have to be very careful about how I address it, or most of the time I just ignore it and try to, because we're locked down, I'm working from home, I don't have to deal with a whole lot of face-to-face conversations about the issue. But, I feel like it's a buzzsaw that I could run into at some point at my place of employment. And so to see that it's being counteracted with an executive order here, I think it's very necessary. And it's, let's get into this. So, President Donald Trump will sign an executive order seeking to reform how U.S. schools teach American history, Trump announced Thursday. The project will reportedly be called the 1776 Commission. I love the name, by the way, the 1776 Commission. It's a great counter to the 1619 project. President Donald Trump, Vice President Mike Pence, and a panel of education and history experts spoke in front of America's founding documents inside the National Archives in Washington, D.C. I love that they gave the speech in front of the founding documents. It says Trump and education and the panel. That's oddly worded. Headed by I think it was Trump and an education panel headed by Hillsdale College president Dr. Larry Arnn derided what they called a cynical public school system that teaches students to be ashamed of American history. Now, it's funny because when I was in college, I earned all A's and B's, mostly A's, except for one C. And that one C happened to be in American history. And I love American history. I typically excel at history. But, of course, our textbooks were things like, A People's History by Howard Zinn. And it was all of that revisionist history that taught the cynical anti-American, anti-founding principles. And so I really shouldn't be surprised that my worst grade in all of college was American history because I was being taught from that revisionist standpoint. So Trump had particularly strong words for the 1619 Project, a revisionist U.S. history produced by the New York Times Magazine that seeks to put slavery at the center of the American founding. Now, the idea of the 1619 Project was that America was actually founded in 1619, and that it was founded as a slave state, and that the Constitution was basically just to enshrine slavery. It seems like it's completely made up with no historical context out of the desire of the authors to undermine America. Because there is no factual basis for the 1619 Project. It's a complete manifestation of, like I said, their desire for America to be rooted in evil so that they can cast that picture and then overthrow the system, after they brainwashed everybody into believing that it was evil. But historians have almost unanimously derided the 1619 Project as essentially being a work of fiction. So, critical race theory, the 1619 Project, and the crusade against American history is toxic propaganda, an ideological poison that, if not removed, will dissolve the civic bonds that tie us together, Trump said. And that is a really, really on-point point. The idea that we have civic bonds that tie us all together. And, I was talking to my sister the other day, and it's kind of funny because not too long ago, my sister described herself as a socialist. And after talking with me, I think she's almost close to voting for Trump. It's been a long, hard road trying to wake her up to what's really going on and what the truth of the matter is. But I was talking to her the other day, and it was almost funny because she was. I don't want to say things that will get her in trouble. Let me just put it this way. I was talking about how I don't like racism at all, but I am a culturalist. that I do believe that certain cultures are better than others, but because we have the freedom to subscribe to whatever culture we believe in, no matter our race, that can't be imbued as racism because it transcends race. It completely transcends it. So I was telling her this story about how a couple years ago I had a I was a Lyft driver or Uber driver, whatever. I was coming home from a bar. I was going out to a bar, so I didn't want to drive. So I took a Uber home, and my driver was Iraqi. And I don't know how we came on the subject, but he starts talking about how he loves Trump, how he loves America, how he loves the freedom here, everything about America. He was basically a flag waving patriot. And I was like, you know what? Welcome to America. So glad to have you here. Don't care one bit that he is Iraqi or brown because, of course, the left likes to refer to everything by skin color, not by, country of origin or ethnic group or anything like that. It's all whether you're white, black, or brown, because they can create more monolithic culture, monolithic coalitions that way. So I was talking to my sister. I was telling her the story about this Iraqi cab driver, and I was telling her, I would much rather have a whole bunch of immigrants coming from places like Afghanistan or Iraq or wherever they're from, where they're completely different skin color than me, so long as they love America, that I would much rather have them here than some, Swedish socialist come over who looks just like me but wants to transform America into some socialist utopia. And so, to me, that completely overrides any kind of idea that race has anything to do with any of it. It's all about culture. And, it's not that you have to come to America and completely abandon any influences from your homeland. That's not how it needs to be looked at. But you still need to accept the civic bonds that tie us together. The way that I look at it is, there's 1,000 ways to prepare chicken. You can spice it any way you want. But as long as it's still chicken, it's still chicken. And the American ideals are the chicken that I'm talking about. You can spice it and flavor it with whatever cultural influences you come from, so long as they aren't ruining the chicken. And for anybody who knows me, and you guys know that I'm a fried chicken junkie. I'm from the South. I grew up on eating fried chicken all the damn time. Nashville hot chicken is my favorite food in the world. Big shout out to Howlin' Ray's here in LA. It's the best Nashville hot chicken I've ever eaten. Sorry, I haven't actually been to Nashville, so that's probably that's probably sacrilegious to anybody in Nashville listening to this. But if you haven't had Howlin' Ray's out here in LA, I have had Hattie B's, and it's better than Hattie B's. Anyways, sorry about the tangent. Love my chicken. So let's continue with the story here. The only path to national unity is through our shared identity as Americans. That is why it is so urgent that we finally restore patriotic education to our schools. Love it, love it, love it. Yes, you can come from anywhere. You can still bring certain cultural influences from wherever you come. I mean, variety is the spice of life. It is good to have different perspectives, but not ones that deviate beyond deviate beyond what our values and traditions as the American Constitution lays us out to be. So, this is from Christopher Rufo. The president is denouncing critical race theory on national television and elevating his intellectual fight into a major campaign theme. The battle lines are drawn. We can embrace the principles of 1776 or the principles of 1619. 1776 all the way. All about it. So, Trump ordered... hold on just a second. Trump ordered his administration earlier in September to cease any critical race theory training programs after they had found such a program was found at the Department of Energy. And that is good, because we cannot have this stuff infecting our political institutions. It's already infected all of our cultural institutions. Which, Andrew Breitbart, politics is downstream of culture. If it's in the culture, it's going to go into the politics eventually, because you're going to have people that are raised through the education system, the academic system, that end up going in to these political agencies, and they're going to bring those ideas with them. And we were all told, like, oh, it's just some college stuff. Well, they're going to get out of college, they're going to experience the real world, they're going to see that that's not how things really are, and they're going to grow up quick. That didn't happen, because there's a mob mentality aspect to it that has essentially led all people who are above these young kids coming in to run scared for the hills, because they get mobbed up by these young new employees, and they end up hijacking the show. So the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution are the greatest charters of freedom the world has ever known, Pence said. Our founders knew history, but sadly we live in a time where too many forget history today. God, that is so true. I mean, we have all of these people that cannot understand the progression of history from the founding times and how the founding documents laid the path for that progression to happen. And the founders did so knowing that they were creating a society that was only going to get better over time. Meanwhile, you have all of these leftists, these Marxists, that completely ignore the history of their own ideology, the brutalism that is embedded into the Marxist communist ideology, the over 100 million people dead, the brutality of the gulags that were essentially concentration camps, the mass starvation, the struggle sessions where they abused people who just didn't go along or had voiced any opposition to the agenda. Very, very evil systems of coercion and brutality. Yet they seem to think that because the rhetoric is enticing to them, that the system is as pure as the rhetoric, but it is not. There's no way to enforce or to create these systems without brutalizing the people. And they don't understand that because they don't know the history. They also don't know the history about how all of the people who actually foment these revolutions are the first ones that get taken out back and killed. Because they don't realize that they're useful idiots for opportunists who... Actually, let me backtrack a bit. I've said this before, but you may not have seen it. There are two types of leftists. There are opportunists and there are useful idiots. And the opportunists use the useful idiots to foment the revolution. And then once the revolution, once the political structure has been overthrown, the opportunists seize control, and the useful idiots who think that they're going to be in control are now all of a sudden a threat. And the opportunists know that it's only a matter of time before these useful idiots realize that they got duped, and they already know how to start a revolution. So they don't want them starting that revolution again against them, so the first move is to execute all of the revolutionaries that got you into your position of power. They don't understand that that has happened time and time again in just about every communist revolution in history. I mean, starting with Leon Trotsky. So... they don't know the history because they're not taught the history. They're taught a revisionist history in which we're the evil ones. And the mass murdering, unmarked grave, gulag running, authoritarian iron fisters are apparently the good people. No, that is not true. It's like Joseph Stalin said, death is the solution to all problems. No man, no problem. That is the Marxist communist way. And they don't seem to realize that, even the ones who seem to realize that that's the way and they think that that's the only way to get to a better, just society, don't realize that they have a firing squad in their future. So Arnn and his fellow panelists, including House and Urban Development Secretary Ben Carson, argued that the American school system teaches students to view founders like George Washington and Thomas Jefferson as hypocrites for owning slaves, despite the fact that they signed the freedom-affirming Declaration of Independence. They argue that the system... so that's what they don't understand. They view the world through what's called presentism, where you look at history through a modern lens. You know, it was a massive revolution. The American Revolution was a massive revolution in thought because it was a massive revolution in self-governance. You couldn't have a massive revolution in self-governance that also was layered with this identitarian, anti-slavery business, because you couldn't have both of them piled on. You gotta take care of one and then take care of the other. It's that old quote of if you chase two rabbit, if you're a hunter and you chase two rabbits, you're sure to lose both of them. So first, it was about getting rid of the tyrannical redcoats and being able to govern ourselves. But it laid the groundwork for a progression in a direction of anti-slavery, of freedom and liberty for all men. It wasn't there at the time because the world was not there. The mental or the the collective mentality was not there. It wouldn't have been popular. It wouldn't have been something that could have actually gone over. And they failed to also realize that at that time, slavery was not a solely American institution. They act like America invented slavery. It didn't. It was a global institution at the time that almost all empires instituted. So the fact that the founding documents laid out the principles to do away with that put us ahead of the curve. I mean, we still have slavery all over the world today, especially in Libya, especially in places in China. I was going to say Asia, but China as well. I mean, China is all about slave labor. It runs on slave labor. And you can still buy a black slave in Libya for $200 today. Now, of course, under Gaddafi, I think you could be executed for slave trade. Now, he was a dictator in his own rights, but the American left was pushing for the overthrow of Gaddafi, and it ended up with a power vacuum and a total anarchic system now where slave markets are back on the table there. So Obama just went in there, overthrew Gaddafi, and then left without installing any kind of system of just governance. I mean, the left just leaves chaos and destruction and death in their wake everywhere they go. So they argue that the system leaves out the critical detail that the founders fully understood the Declaration was an anti-slavery document, that they saw slavery as an evil to be expunged. But the time has to be right. It's the exact same thing with the revolutionaries of the 1960s or the 1970s or the 1980s. The communist creep into our culture did so out of an understanding that America was not ready for a communist revolution. So if you have that understanding, how can you also not understand that in 1776, America was not ready for the whole social justice mentality of today? Hell, even we're not ready for the social justice mentality today because that is Marxist. But, there's a reason that Marxism and communism uses subversion. It's because they know that the countries that they are trying to overtake through their Marxism, they have to prime them. They have to subvert them and gradually demoralize that nation before they're ripe for an overthrow. And so they can understand that, but they can't understand how in 1776, when slavery was a worldwide institution, how America wasn't necessarily ready for an overnight dissolution of slavery. It's that George Orwell quote that I talked about a couple days ago, where crime thought is basically, I forget the exact quote and I don't have it pulled up because I wasn't prepared to bring it up, but how it's basically protective stupidity, how it means that you can't understand analogies, you can't understand critical nuances, and anything that counteracts your narrative, you just you either find it boring or you just don't understand it, you just shut it out entirely. It's protective stupidity. So how they can, see it on their side but not see it on the other side, it's either protective stupidity or disingenuous dishonesty. So all the books say that Thomas Jefferson was a hypocrite because he wrote the Declaration of Independence and yet he was a slaveholder, Arnn said. That is a very reductive way of looking at it. Incredibly reductive. He did do those things, but what they're not told is that he thought himself that the Declaration of Independence condemned the institution of slavery. Arnn went on to reference a quote from Jefferson on slavery: "In the contest between the master and the slave, the Almighty has no attribute that can side with us. I tremble for my country when I think that God is just." What a powerful quote. He understood the evils. But, again, you cannot look at history through presentism. you cannot look at history through the moral standards of today. There is a progression for these things. And people think that only black people were enslaved, without ever realizing that the term slave comes from the Slavs, the Slavic people, and how they were constantly enslaved over history. They have no idea about the Barbary slave trade, where North African countries would raid the southern Mediterranean coast and enslave, I think it was about 1.75 million people were enslaved in the Barbary slave trade, and how many were actually, how much slavery was involved in the Middle East as well, the Arab countries and Persian countries. So they seem to think that it's a solely Western institution, when it was absolutely not. We were the first ones to get rid of it, and it is still in use around many parts of the world today, in Africa, in the Middle East, in Asia. Where is it not? In America, in Europe, in Australia, the Western civilizations. So Carson echoed his fellow panelists in arguing that America's colleges and universities teach students to feel victimized rather than teaching self-government. Yeah, and that's the whole thing, is they want people to feel victimized, because a victim needs a savior. And so the Marxists, the leftists, the big government types, even those who aren't, full-blown Marxists, just people who want these big government social programs, who want this big government intervention, they need people to feel victimized, because they need to be that. They need the victims to need the saviors for them to come in and be that as big government, as big brother. So we have to realize that we are being, as a society, manipulated by people who have an agenda, Carson said, and you can't fight people with an agenda unless you have one also, unless you have a plan. Yes. Yes. And so I think this is what is so great about the Trump administration and the Trump presidency, is that they are pushing back, and they are not afraid of the fight. They're not afraid to fight. They're not afraid to use their own... They're not afraid to use the left's own ideas against them, or their own methodologies, their own tactics. And it's kind of like that meme where you see the Antifa person, they go up and they start beating on somebody on the right, and then the person on the right defends themselves, and then the Antifa person who did the instigating goes, "Help, help, I'm being oppressed, I'm being oppressed." And of course, the videos are only turned on when the violence starts. All they catch is the part where the person on the right is beating up on the person on the left, not knowing that the person on the left is the one who actually instigated it. But then once the person on the right counters with the exact same counter move, although usually better, because people on the right tend to be stronger and better prepared to fight and defend themselves, they cry victim. Because they're pussies. So... anyways, guys, that's the video. Go ahead and hit the like button if you like this video. If you haven't already subscribed to the channel, please do so. Share this content. I'm a small channel. I'm trying to grow. I'm trying to get to 1,000 subscribers. I think that's a threshold where it starts picking up more. It's been a very slow grind getting up here to 1,000. Still working on getting there. So also follow me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Parler at Ram Thorburn. And if you're interested in helping contribute to the show, I could use some resources to get some better equipment. My Subscribe Star, Patreon, and PayPal are all linked to in the description below. Anyways, guys, thank you for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.